Okay, so I'm picking up where we left off on Part D of the Rainbow Swastika. This is about the plan. And we left off, I'll read the last sentence. As powerful as they are, these spirits will have to work through the relatively weak and primitive physical plane. Hence the need for initiating humans for the purpose of inhabiting their bodies. See the description of walk-ins in the God section. I'm going to check that out right now. Okay, we're going back to the section previous to this. Part C, the New Age Gods. Number 7. The New Age Gods overshadowing humans, from teachers to tenants. Humans are gods, if only they knew it. But Krem, that's Benjamin Krem, clarifies that when people pray, they are not to pray to themselves, but to the God within, or the God immanent. This is their higher God self, whom they do not know yet as their self. God being in all, this higher self is in union or at one-ment with other selves higher up in their spiritual evolution, ancient spirits who have mastered their godhood and ascended to a higher vibration, no longer needing bodies. These beings who already know their highest selves as God are divine from our standpoint. They know of our race's condition and have offered mankind their help in evolving into godhood. So in practical terms, prayers directed to these higher beings as though to God, and responses are transmitted from them. Since they are united with the divine, the enlightened worshiper is expected to accept their every word as divine truth, even if it seems like nonsense or contradicts what they said yesterday. If he does so, the recipient will gain knowledge, power, health, and inner peace, and come closer to his own godhood. In response to human need, some of these masters become avatars by occasionally taking up residence on the physical plane within a human host, known as incarnation in their own body, or overshadowing, sharing the body with another soul. There are different degrees of overshadowing, ranging from divine impressions, resulting in channeling and dictation of wisdom literature, to the host actually stepping out of his body to allow the master, in quotes, full control. See Alice Bailey's A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, page 756 and 757. This last stage transforms the outwardly normal-looking person into a body hosting an alien resident. The human owner is known in New Age parlance as a walkout, and the spirit tenant is a benevolent walk-in. Interesting, such a thing as spiritual free lunch. Read on, end brackets. A detailed explanation of the phenomenon is available in the landmark 1979 book, Strangers Among Us, Enlightened Beings from a World to Come, by Ruth Montgomery, a walk-in enthusiast. In brackets. Although outdated, it is useful in presenting the basics of this belief. Montgomery, who claims to have received her information through channeling, writes, quote, "Most walk-ins zealously guard the secret of their altered identity because people tend to fear the phenomenon and would launch witch hunts. But walk-ins can be identified by their unusual powers, including mind reading, the power to forestall human activity, and the ability to insert thoughts into a human mind which he thinks are his own." In brackets again, Star Wars fans will recall the ability of the Jedi Knight to do all these. End brackets. Montgomery was told that walk-ins number into the tens of thousands as of 1979, and she prophesies of a walk-in U.S. president at some point. It is common for disincarnate spirits to approach a human host and ask for entry, but step-by-step instructions are provided in Strangers for people who don't want to wait to be propositioned. Montgomery elaborates on the reasons a human host decides to check out of his body and permit an exalted one to move in. A reluctance to face the coming Holocaust, being discouraged or heartsick, and wishing for a long period of rest from worldly cares. These voluntary walkouts will be exempt from the bad karma normally incurred by failing to fulfill one's life purpose, since they are contributing to the good of others. What a deal. Who doesn't want a rest from worldly cares? As society becomes more chaotic, walkout volunteers can be expected to increase exponentially. How convenient for the disembodied spirits who admittedly crave a human vehicle, especially when other walk-ins have the power of thought control to induce a sense of discouragement into a desirable potential host. End brackets. In brackets again, no one seems disturbed at this particular situation. Here are perfected beings who, when unburdened of their terrestrial tabernacles, their freed souls are united forever with their spirits and rejoin the whole shining host. And that's from Blavatsky, Isis Unveiled, page 159. Now, they suddenly need a primitive vehicle again and cannot acquire one by simple reincarnation, but insist on confiscating a body already inhabited. As for the ostensible intention to help mankind, an ulterior motive for a spirit entering a human host is inadvertently identified. Self-advancement in the brotherhood. See Strangers, page 31, 94, and 95. The one queer exception to the walk-in possibilities is Mr. Logos himself, Sanat Kumara, who for all his great power is not able, or should that be not permitted, to function in a physical body. See Initiation, Human and Solar, page 28. The takeover of spirits entering directly into adult bodies is apparently a ticklish maneuver and must be coordinated by certain brotherhoods specializing in this service. And that is the end of that section on walk-ins. And this is from the section of the book titled The New Age Gods. So maybe I'll come back and read this whole chapter. I wasn't sure how many chapters I was going to read, but number 5, who will direct world affairs under the plan? 5a, naturally it is the hierarchy who will ultimately control world affairs when the Christ appears physically, leading to the definite restoration of the mysteries. And that's from Alice Bailey, Externalization, page 570. Their closest assistants on the human plane, according to Foster Bailey, Alice's husband, are the higher level initiates in the Masons. When the mysteries are restored and Masonry resumes its true function, the Grand Master will also resume his ancient prerogatives, for he will be chosen for his initiate rank, and that involves initiate knowledge. He will be restored to his ancient status, and his right to authority will be recognized. And that's from The Spirit of Masonry, page 79. New Age philosopher and Masonic leader Manly P. Hall concurs that the Masonic Grand Master is at the final level of human contact with the spiritual consciousness that originates in the spiritual hierarchy. And that's from The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, page 35 and 36. Alice also looked forward to a future Masonic movement which, quote, when it can be divorced from politics and social ends and from its present paralyzing condition of inertia, will meet the need of those who can and should wield power. Externalization, page 511. Note Hitler's partiality to certain of the old Masonic lodges in the Nazism section. Also for a wealth of direct quotes confirming the Luciferian orientation of the top Masonic leadership, see Gary Kah and Route to Global Occupation. 5b. Mouthpiece of the Hierarchy. A New United Nations. This world body, as it functions today, is only a shadow of what New Age leaders envision for it. Robert Mueller, who invested at least 30 years of his life there, loses no opportunity to sing its praises, calling the UN the meta-organism of human and planetary evolution. That's from a letter to all educators in the world. He dedicated his landmark book, New Genesis, Shaping a Global Spirituality, to the United Nations, the first universal organization of this planet. Mueller expects the UN to bring nothing less than a moral and spiritual renaissance. And that is from the Temple of Understanding newsletter, spring 1995. Both he and the Hindu mystical teacher in residence at the UN, Sri Chinmoy Kumar Ghose, who so far as to speak of the UN in a spiritual entity, or perhaps the collective channel for the spiritual entity expected to arrive. Quote, "No human force will ever be able to destroy the United Nations, for the UN is not a mere building or a mere idea. It is not a man-made creation. The UN is the vision light of the Absolute Supreme. The divine success and supreme progress of the United Nations is bound to become a reality. At his choice hour, the Absolute Supreme," Absolute Supreme is in capital letters. "The Absolute Supreme will ring his own victory bell here on earth through the loving and serving heart of the United Nations." And in parentheses, Mueller quoting Chinmoy, quote, "My testament to the UN. But Mueller is aware that the present UN does not have the power needed to fulfill its mission. Quote, "The world's survival requires an enormously strengthened second generation United Nations," unquote. And that's from 50 years later, a testimony, 1995. At some point, Robert Mueller himself may be tapped to head the new UN, an event which seemed close to happening in 1995. His decision at that time to withdraw, I suspect, was a matter of timing. He is slated to head the second generation, which was not fully ready in 1995. But even if Mueller never officially leads the UN, his leadership in it is assured. As his New Age colleague Barbara Marx Hubbard writes, Mueller has a full-scale plan of action to carry us into the 21st century. He wins in influence no matter whether or not he is elected to the post of UN Secretary General. He activates the support of the critical mass to support the advanced United Nations that he advocates. And that is from the Social Potential Movement, page 18. For a taste of what Mueller has already activated, see his role in New Age education. And that is a link probably to another section of this book. This is an online book. It's not really an article, but it has not been published in book form. That was a pause. Unpause. One key group, the UN Commission on Global Governance, called for a world conference in 1998 for the purpose of submitting to the world the necessary treaties and agreements for ratification and implementation by the year 2000. In brackets, the attempt to obtain ratification in 2000 failed, but the patient New Age planners have merely scaled down their incremental progress accordingly, end brackets. In their 1995 report to the UN, Our Global Neighborhood, available online, this distinguished panel outlines the results of over 7 years of careful work. In the foreword, the co-chairmen go to great pains to reassure the reader that global governance is not global government, lest we think a worldwide police state is in the making. And yet they admit that governance cannot function without systems and rules and must in fact enforce them. Quote, the very essence of global governance is the capacity of the international community to ensure compliance with the rules of society, unquote, which is Chapter 6, Enforcing International Law. We are also promised that national sovereignty will be respected. However, a nation's sovereignty is limited by the fundamental interests of humanity, which in certain severe circumstances must prevail over the ordinary rights of particular states. And that's from Chapter 2, Adopting Old Norms. In brackets, the circumstances which override national self-determination are not specified, but according to UN-supported philosopher Alice Bailey, it is in the, quote, fundamental interest of humanity, unquote, to eliminate both territorial nationalism and the Jewish problem, which gave rise to the sovereign Zionist state. To ensure compliance, there is a UN World Constitution which includes an agreement by the governments of the nations to order their separate sovereignties into one government, to which they surrender their arms. Pause. Last year, I think it was in 2024, there was a UN summit, a pact for the future, something like that. And they were talking about AI governance. And now we're here in 2025, and they're rolling out all the AI stuff. So the United Nations is still around, and they're still planning their plans and doing their things. Anyway, unpause. Where was I? Other arrangements include a UN trusteeship council, which will take control of the global commons, or all international waters and airspace. A UN Economic Security Council to set up a global funding and barter system with the power to withhold funding from uncooperative nations. A single monetary and taxation system that will require all commerce to be conducted via a universally registered credit number for each Earth citizen. Pause again. Have we gotten any closer to that right now? Unpause. And a standing UN army to assume peacekeeping responsibilities in areas of conflict. In parentheses, pinpointed by Dr. Henry Lamb, Executive VP of the Environmental Conservation Organization and Chairman of Sovereignty International, end parentheses. See also the research of government insider Gary Kaw, En route to global occupation, which documents the early covert activities of the World Constitution and Parliament Association during the early to mid 1980s. And pause again. Gary Kaw also wrote a book, which I have not read yet, but I have listened to him on a few interviews, a book about the coming world religion. So, and he's a Christian. Very interesting. UN Global Management is shared by the 5 regional groups. These 5 regions, created over 50 years ago, are the member pool for all voting members of all the UN commissions, councils, committees, working groups, and other decision-making forums. The UN Charter states, quote, regional groups are for the UN increasingly important potential partners whose cooperation could be engaged to delegate responsibility, unquote. The UN report, Renewing the United Nations, a Program for Reform, submitted in July 1997 by the Executive Coordinator for Reform, Mr. Maurice Strong, in brackets, himself a dedicated New Age disciple, end bracket, specifies that the regional groups, quote, will be intensified and they will increasingly become partners of the UN. The major structural changes proposed for the new UN can be done only with the approval of these 5 groups. And that's from UN Report, UN Reform, the first 6 weeks, February 1997. For over 50 years, all member states of the UN, now numbering 188, have been assigned a place among these regional groups except one. Israel has been denied membership in any regional group. Okay, that might have changed, but I'm just reading this book for you. making the Jewish state the only nation unable to make a meaningful contribution to this global body since her admission 51 years ago. In brackets, this is a long and interesting story. See my report titled, A Nation That Dwells Alone. Pay particular attention to the final update, which exposes the mockery of Israel's more recent admission to membership in a regional group. The 1998 report of the UN Environmental Program, UNEP, omits any mention of Israel in its 264 pages, in spite of this country's notable contributions to the environment. Where mention of that country is unavoidable in the Western Asian section, it is labeled Palestine. Even the Committee in Mideast Questions, a branch of the Interparliamentary Union, has no Israeli presence, in spite of 3 vacant seats, and the fact that 25% of all UN resolutions have related to Israel. But all of this is to be expected given the close affinity between UN policy and Alice Bailey's teachings. See her comments on Zionism for context. And there's a link there. In 1976, right after the plan went public, the Ascended Masters, in quotations, gave orders to establish 5 world centers in anticipation of the New World Order. According to Benjamin Krem, they are located in New York, London, Geneva, Darjeeling, and Tokyo. In brackets, their locations, however, do not appear to coincide with the UN's 5 regional groups. End brackets. A nucleus of world servers, in quotes, has also been trained to run these centers. International committees have been quietly working on multi-stage programs for implementing the new order from these centers. Many of them have already recruited resources and personnel and need only the signal to become operational. Global groups destined to think for humanity. Number 6, global groups destined to think for humanity. A group of human deputies has already taken up the mantle of world management in the name of the UN and the hierarchy. 6a. A milestone conference was held in 1995 dubbed the State of the World Forum and sponsored by the Gorbachev Foundation. In attendance were more than 400 of the power elite from 50 countries under the guidance of Mikhail Gorbachev, James Baker, George Shultz, 1 former communist dictator, and 2 former U.S. Secretaries of State. The strong power base of the conference was further underlined by the presence of personages like billionaire eco-warrior Maury Strong, former UN mogul Robert Mueller, former U.S. National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, former U.S. President George Bush, former UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, network media maker Ted Turner, print media giant Rupert Murdoch, and, last but not least, computer media prince Bill Gates. In brackets, African National Congress leader Thabo Mbeki was almost comical when he expressed pleasure at representing the poor and suffering African peoples in this forum, which is so unlike other global circles where the world's agenda is addressed only by the powerful. End brackets. The strong New Age orientation was evident from other participants. Barbara Marx Hubbard, John Denver, Shirley MacLaine, Matthew Fox, Carl Sagan, Jeremy Rifkin, Willis Harman, and Deepak Chopra. Ted Turner gave an executive summary of the forum's task to help chart the way for humanity. Gorbachev elaborated, quote, to launch a multi-year process culminating in the year 2000 to articulate the fundamental priorities, values, and actions necessary to constructively shape our common future. We are in dire need of redefining the parameters of our society's economic, social, political, and spiritual development. In brackets, this kind of priority would confirm the claim by Benjamin Creme in a 1998 radio interview with Art Bell that Michael Gorbachev is a Maitreya disciple. Yes, I've heard that. That Mikhail Gorbachev was a Maitreya disciple, and actually I think he said he was meeting with him. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember. Unpause. The steering committee, which will reinvent the paradigm of our existence, is to be called the Brain Trust, described as a kind of United Nations Council of Elders. They are not identified further except as, in the words of John Nesbitt, leaders who will lead by moral authority. The point is not what such a leader is going to do. The point is who he is going to be. In brackets, track record of performance is thus replaced by spiritual destiny. Or perhaps this refers to who his body is hosting. Ooh. The areas in most dire need were discussed, leading gradually to the bottom lines found at every New Age forum. From Gorbachev, quote, to change the nature of consumption. In brackets, oddly, none of Gorbachev's well-heeled listeners, much less Gorby himself, redefined any parameters by refusing to pay $5,000 a head to stay at the luxurious Fairmont Hotel and enjoy the fabulous dinners created by a flock of famous chefs recruited for the forum. End brackets. To address, quote, to address the problem of controlling the world's population, see the recommendation of Dr. Keene and another forum participant. And here's from Brzezinski. To move toward eventual globalization by progressive regionalization, since national sovereignty is no longer a viable concept. In brackets, precisely the UN's multi-stage goal of global governance already in progress, end brackets. From Qasa Kabid, former UN ambassador, to transfer armaments, especially those of the U.S., to international control and form a standing army under UN command. In brackets, more goals of the UN, see our global neighborhood, the report of the Commission on Global Governance mentioned above, end brackets. From Willis Harman, president of Noetic Sciences, to usher in a social order which acknowledges the connectedness of everything, an emphasis on intuition and the assumption of inner divinity. And from Rupert Sheldrake, theosophist, to tap into the morphogenic field which connects all life and thought and provides access to the ageless wisdom, in quotes. Last, but in New Age priorities, definitely not least, Fritjof Capra, author of an essay distributed free to all participants, The Turning of the Tide, printed in Revision, a Journal of Consciousness and Transformation, fall of 1993, condemns the, quote, Judeo-Christian tradition for supporting male domination and the superiority of rational thinking. The superiority of rational thinking, for anti-ecological attitudes, and for hindering the proper understanding of nature. Its image of a male god, personification of supreme reason and source of ultimate power, who rules the world from above by imposing his divine law on it, and the view that natural laws are reflections of this divine law, originating in the mind of God, must inevitably make way for the new spiritual path of the future. Number 6B. Special military branches are being prepared to help maintain order on behalf of the hierarchy, using not only conventional forces but also psychic powers acquired by initiation. Among these are the 1st Earth Battalion of Guerrilla Gurus, founded by Barbara Marx Hubbard and, quote, the Task Force Delta. Task Force Delta. Founded by Barbara Marx Hubbard. I need to find out more about that. Okay. A strategy planning division for the U.S. Army utilizing psychologists and parapsychologists, where Hubbard is also a member. Colonel John B. Alexander, co-author of The Warrior's Edge, advocates psychic weapons for mind manipulation of the enemy and discusses the use of remote viewing, which is clairvoyance and mind reading, with the casual attitude of someone long past the introductory stage of initiation. Quote, the ethical difficulties of remote viewing are not unlike those involved with the introduction of any other new invasive technology. Page 154. The Colonel's concern for ethical standards is heartening until we read how he resolves the difficulties. Quote, all intelligence techniques require ruthlessness, duplicity, and absolute integrity. No, these are not contradictions in terms. If you are using influence technologies correctly, you can and will achieve your objective by the manipulation of others. Recognize what you are doing. We do. If this manipulation is for the eventual benefit of these others as well as yourself, then you are adhering to the warrior ethic. Unquote. 6C. The working class of the new humanity is organized as, quote, the new group of world servers, unquote, often shortened to NGWS. In brackets, please acquaint yourself with the New Age notion of service, which is not what most people associate with the word, end brackets. Not all world servers are consciously serving the plan. However, this group is multi-level, ranging from full initiates who are consciously part of the Great White Lodge to ordinary folks who respond to the idealism and know nothing of the hierarchy. And that's from Discipleship in the New Age by Alice Bailey. All individuals who are considered fit for the New Age will be required to serve as an expression of their love. Those who are not considered eligible include those people who, clinging to reactionary methods of finding and expressing truth, prefer obedience to authority to clear thinking and self-imposed guidance of their own soul. And that's from the new group of world servers, Lucius Trust, page 3. Quote, read that one again, friends. Those who refuse to totally surrender to the Master's absolute authority are accused of clinging to an outmoded obedience to authority. And people who insist on the freedom to form and follow their own individual convictions rather than unquestioning New Age groupthink are guilty of rejecting clear thinking and the guidance of their own soul. Unquote. George Orwell's 1984 doublespeak has arrived. Yes, it definitely does. Has. World servers, in direct contrast, are those who affirm the fundamental truths by which humanity has evolved. Truths which will eventually lead humanity into a new age of peace and plenty. One way to bring about this peace is to repudiate violently the unproven, in brackets. Apart from this interesting new strategy for making peace, we see here that even though New Agers view their version of human evolution as proven, it is preferable to convince the skeptics through violent repudiation than simply presenting the vast evidence in its favor, end brackets. The world servers placed in leadership will recognize no authority save that of their own souls. And that's from the new group of world servers, page 7. In brackets, their own souls by that point will no longer be their own, of course, in the accepted sense of autonomy and ownership, but New Age redefinition of these concepts has neatly solved that dilemma. End bracket. The primary function of these world server leaders is to utilize all the known methods to reach the general public. They stir the middle class to activity and, through them, arouse the masses. And that's on page 6. Leaving the rank and file servers among the masses to the guidance of their own soul is apparently not as trustworthy as it was only 3 pages earlier. The very first task of the new group of world servers in rebuilding on the ruins of World War II was to be the development of right human relations through the education of the masses. And that's from the Rays and Initiations, page 88. In brackets, learn what the term right human relations means for the Jews in the Views on Jews section. Their second task will be to install the new world religion and the only one allowed in the new age. Yeah, right human relations is the Holocaust, which you probably heard if you listened to the beginning of this or the first part. Number 7, the plan for selective disarmament. The concept of a new world order was coined by Bailey's hierarchy decades before U.S. President George Bush made it a familiar political phrase. From the beginning, forced disarmament was seen to immediately precede the new world order. In the preparatory period, quote, in the preparatory period for the new world order, there will be a steady and regulated disarmament. It will not be optional. No nation will be permitted to produce and organize any equipment for destructive purposes. Unquote, from Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 191. Disarmament in the context of a global anti-war movement was the first order issued to change agents from New Age leader H.G. Wells in his strategic book, The Open Conspiracy. This mandatory disarmament applies especially to nuclear weapons, but not for the reason that many activists think. Quote, the atomic bomb was used only twice destructively. Its constructive uses are twofold at this time. A, as a forerunner of that release of energy which will change the mode of human living and inaugurate the new age wherein we shall not have civilizations and their cultures, but a world culture and an emerging civilization. And B, as a means in the hands of the United Nations to enforce the outer forms of peace, thus give time for the teaching to take effect. The atomic bomb does not belong to, at that time, 1957, the 3 nations who own the secrets at present. It belongs to the United Nations for use, or let us rather hope simply for threatened use, when aggressive action on the part of any nation rears its ugly head, or for use on political groups of any powerful religious organization who are as yet unable to leave politics alone. And that is from the Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 548. Clearly, disarmament is to be regulated and steady, but not universal. Its purpose is to put nuclear weapons exclusively in the hands of the UN for the purpose of pressuring any national, political, or religious entity which tries to oppose the new worldwide political, religious blend by following their own blend. The only nations which combine religion and politics are the Vatican City-State and the radical Muslim countries, and of course the Jewish state. In brackets, of these, the only nation possessing nuclear weapons is Israel. This puts into perspective the ever-increasing pressure from the UN on Israel to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Pacts and open her nuclear facilities to UN supervision. The next step will be disarmament, then use as a means to enforce the outer forms of UN-sponsored New Age religious agenda on Israel. The multitudes of peace activists recruited into various disarmament movements would be shocked to learn that human evolution actually requires mass destruction now and then. The benefits of world war, Bailey says, have never been appreciated by the unenlightened. After confessing that a direct blast of the Shambhala energy, the energy which triggers destruction, was responsible for World War II and specifically for Hitler's success, she defends this deliberate widespread stimulation by claiming that the so-called evil results of the Shambhala force have brought spiritual growth. To those disciples distressed about the ghastly world war at this time, she breezily explains that in the view of the hierarchy, quote, the fate of the form life, physical life, and of outer organizations is deemed of small importance, end quote. In fact, destruction of the outer form must take place to allow the building of the new and more adequate outer expression. This accounts for the world crisis at this time, end quote, from the Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 108. Now, doesn't that sound like Build Back Better, the building of the new and more adequate outer expression? That's what it reminds me of. And I think that's still happening. But anyway. Earlier, she firmly states that the Shambhala force is dedicated to the destruction of that which is undesirable and hindering in the present world forms, in government, religion, and society, on page 72. In effect, Bailey here validates Hitler's obsession with destruction. Not only that, but she claims that his inspiration came directly from the hierarchy. For more of Bailey's comments on Hitler activity, see the Nazism section. But meanwhile, the general revulsion toward destruction and death expressed by the uninitiated masses is useful. It can be harnessed to further the New Age plan for disarmament. Oh boy. It is noteworthy that in the same breath with disarmament, Wells also targeted communism for elimination, a prospect that seemed impossible right up until the day it suddenly happened. In brackets, I personally do not mourn the demise of Soviet communism with its dehumanizing oppression, but as we have seen, the plan of the enlightened leaders and their spirit guides does not take into account physical misery, so it would be a basic mistake to presume humanitarian motives for Wells' directive. Based on the self-proclaimed extent of the benevolent conspiracy and based on the prominent position Mikhail Gorbachev holds in a major New Age power forum, the surprise collapse of the Soviet Union during his tenure was due to more than internal problems, likely triggered on command from above, in quotations. It should not be forgotten that the massive nuclear arsenal of the USSR was only partly dismantled at the time of its collapse, and unknown numbers of nuclear weapons are reported missing. In brackets, perhaps quietly passed into UN hands for the plan's future peacekeeping effort outlined above by Bailey. The next target is clear, given the strong American antagonism expressed recently and, much too belatedly to be sincere, toward Communist China, complete with rhetoric reminiscent of the old Cold War. In brackets, why is there no corresponding saber-rattling at Communist Vietnam, Korea, or Cuba? The answer may lie in the fact that only China has nuclear capability, and China's nuclear arsenal is destined for the UN cache as soon as the regime collapses. And this is the conclusion of segment D. At the end of this section is the table of contents. And I'm thinking of maybe picking a couple other chapters to read. So I'll just tell you what they are. How big a conspiracy, human history per New Age. The Gods of the New Age, The Plan of the New Age, which I just finished reading. Views on Jews in Judaism, Nazism, and New Age. The Transformation of Society, Education in the New Age, Missionizing Among Jews, and What to Do, a Jewish Response. Again, this book is written by a Jewish woman to warn Jewish people, so it's from a Jewish perspective. I'm thinking maybe The Gods of the New Age and Nazism in New Age. Those two might be good. Although Human History per New Age might be interesting. Anyway, just letting you know. You can let me know in the comments if you have a preference. Thanks for watching or listening.
Run.
There's just one name that can keep you out of hell, and it's the name of Jesus. The name of Jesus. The name of Jesus.